The Cincinnati Reds simply need to be better. This is going to be the team of almost, and this ain't horseshoes. We're going to tell you what their chances are on today's Locked On Reds.
You are Locked On Reds, your daily Cincinnati Reds podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Reds podcast. My name is Jeff, his name is Steve, and we are lifelong Cincinnati Reds fans. We've been podcasting about this team for a combined 14 seasons, and we're glad that you're alongside us here today. Locked On Reds is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team, your Reds, every single day. And on today's podcast, Sal Stewart is here, and Sal Stewart needs to play, but where? And what is the plan for that? We'll discuss that later on in today's show. Coming up here in just a few minutes, we're seeing a turnaround in Matt McLain's season, the kind of awakening, if you will, that we were hoping for much of the year. Let's see if he can finish strong. We'll discuss that in just a few moments. But we will begin with another one of those losses, Steve. It's just there's at this point, the jar is super full with those losses, and I think it's pointing to an overarching theme that we can finally admit. That's all coming up on this episode that is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. And 4-3, another extra innings loss. The Reds are now 3-11 in extra innings games this year. It's funny because if you look at their record breakdown on our favorite website, baseballreference.com, they've actually gotten better in one-run games, but they traded that for stinking in extra innings games. And I think it just points to the fact that, you know, this team is fine, Steve. It's fine, but it's not good.
Yeah, good, excellent, exceptional. None of those words apply. You look at this team, and you know I kind of touched on it there in the open, Jeff. They're the team of almost. The 2025 Cincinnati Reds history in review. That book should just be titled Almost in big bold letters, because that's really the way you describe this team. They were almost good enough to compete. They were almost good enough to make us believe all year long. They were almost good enough to stumble their way into a playoff spot. And yet here we are with them not being able to seal the deal once again. It feels like, the long Cincinnati Reds nightmare is just going to keep continuing and continuing, and they're just not quite breaking out of it. I was so hopeful, Jeff, and I know you live in the land of optimism and the land of the 0.5%, and you look at it. I mean, the Mets lost also. They're now a game behind the Giants. The Reds are a game behind the Giants after the San Diego game. So technically, in theory, I suppose that 0.5% still remains, but right. for that to materialize, you're absolutely right with this topic. They've got to be better, and I just don't see at this point that there's anything they can do to be better. Like, if they were going to get better, they would have got better.
And I think that people are like, oh, wow, great job, guys, really deep analysis. But there's one play in particular that really highlights this point to me, because I think you and I both really enjoy watching TJ Friedl play baseball. We really like him, and I think he's a great dude. He's very easy to root for, and he's a fine ball player. But there was a play that if he were a good ball player, he would have made. And I know that it's tough to try to put blame, and I know that especially on Locked On Reds Discord, which, by the way, if you haven't joined that, I invite you to join that. I'm active on that all week here as the Reds are on the West Coast. But folks were trying to blame Tito. They're like, well, why did they pull Nick Lodolo so early? Or why did they bring in this guy? Or why did he do this? Or why this is Tito's fault? At some point, the players got to make the plays. And TJ Friedl had a chance where it was 2 outs, and it was the 6th inning or the 5th inning. I forget which inning it was, but it was a deep fly ball from Jackson Merrill into the gap that TJ Friedl ranged over. He was there. He had to make the perfect route. He had to run the perfect speed. He had to take the perfect slide to put himself in a position to get the ball. And he got his glove on the ball. He just couldn't squeeze it in time, and it falls to the turf. And you know what? At that point, I can't blame anybody but TJ Friedl. And it feels unfair to blame a guy like that because he is a fine ball player. But I look at the Padres and I say, if this was flipped, if TJ Friedel had hit that fly ball and Jackson Merrill or Fernando Tatis were chasing after that baseball, one of those guys gets that. And it's just because they are good. And TJ Friedel is fine. He's just not on their level.
He's not a Gold Glover out there. I mean, that's really what you're talking about. He's a serviceable major leaguer. He's a major league outfielder. Yes, he's not elite. Those guys are elite, and those are the difference makers. And the Reds, the Reds have it within their capabilities, their abilities to do things to better the defensive alignment, and we're going to get through a lot of that today. But it's it's we make fun of Tim for being Wish Jeff Carr, and this is like the Reds are the Wish baseball team. They just they keep ordering online, hope they find that deal, and then when the comes, it's not.
And I think that's why people are so frustrated with him, and I think that's where we're so frustrated with him, is that we know they're not bad, and there's so many people that are like, oh, this team's horrible. They're not horrible, but the biggest problem is they're not good. They are a 500 ball club. I said like 84 wins. I think that's still where they end up, but that's not going to get you to the playoffs. And in this day and age, when so many teams make the playoffs, that just seems ridiculous that you did not build the roster that way. And we'll get into, roster building quite a bit this offseason, but at the same time, the Reds were counting on guys to take a step. And I know that there were some people that brought up the point of, it feels like, because, later on in the game, you had a lefty at the plate and they brought Brent Suter in to face him because Brent Suter's the only lefty in this bullpen right now. And they're like, boy, another bad roster construction. That's on Sam Maul. Sam Maul didn't pitch well this season. Sam Maul showed up to camp out of shape. Sam Maul wasn't ready for the season, had to hit the IL before he even got here. There were so many different things. And so that's a case in point where we talked about yesterday, this team is relying too much on Elly De La Cruz for him to continue this slump. There's other guys on this team as well that have not stepped up. Christian Encarnacion Strand was supposed to be the answer at cleanup hitter. That was the gamble that the Reds took, that they didn't have to go get somebody because they said, our team is on the field, and your team that is on the field did not take the step forward that they all collectively gambled they would.
Yeah, I mean, you want to know how much the Reds leaned into that. CES was in Louisville for his bobblehead night. The Reds had planned a bobblehead night for CES for the month of September. That's how much they thought he was going to be the cleanup hitter on this team. And it just nowhere near came to being. And Sam Maul, another great example of this. You had hoped that Jake Fraley would have been a big part of a platoon on this team, and the Reds gave up on that. We had the conversation about Will Benson yesterday. Who knows what's going on there, but these were all guys that the Reds were counting on to play significant roles. Now, not all of them everyday starters, but platoon guys that had a role to fill, and the Reds had a certain expectation of how they were going to deliver upon that. And when you get into a list now of 2, 3, 4, 5 guys that didn't come to fruition, your gamble didn't pay off. You lost. The house wins, and that's what happened this season for the Reds.
Yeah, 100%. This is what we're talking about when they need to be better, and that's why this offseason's theme is answer questions. The front office has questions that they need to answer, and quite frankly, Steve, all season long, we've had a big question surrounding the Reds' second baseman, and it feels like he himself is beginning to answer those doubts.
There's nothing like catching a baseball game live, the energy, the crowd, the chance to see your team in person. But actually getting tickets, that's the tough part. Queues, login screens, surprise fees, it takes all the fun out of it. That's why I use Game Time. The app gives you the advantage. It puts the advantage back in the hands of the fans. Game Times is fast, easy, and backed by the Game Time guarantee. You always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. Plus, all the fees are included, so the price you see is the price you pay. Jeff and I use this all the time. We head down to the banks, we grab something to eat, we grab ourselves a drink, and as it gets close to first pitch, we jump on the app and we grab our tickets at greatly reduced prices. And you can get in on the action as well. Just download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, the promo code is LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase on the Game Time app. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. Make sure you're subscribed. That way you don't miss any of the great Reds content we've got for you here at Locked On Reds. You get Jeff and I 5 days a week on the Locked On Reds podcast. That's also going to get you the Locked On Reds postcast. The Reds postcast hosted by Tim Daniel live after each and every game, including those West Coast starts. You call them late night Reds. I call them decently timed Reds out here in Hawaii. I love it. You get all of that. Just click the subscribe button today. All right, Jeff, Matt McLain. This is my guy. I have been a huge Matt McLain fan. I've rooted for him. I feel like what we're seeing now is him finally being fully recovered from his injury. The swing looks better. It looks like he's driving through the ball. It looks like he's got full extension in his swings. They've talked about this on the broadcasts. Barry Larkin talked about this the other day. That Matt McLain just looks better and he looks healthy and he looks comfortable. And, you know, this isn't something that Matt McLain could have done differently. He could have done better. This is just the nature of shoulders. And it was always going to be this way. And it just took this much time for him to get to where he needed to be. And I think now he can finish the season with kind of an exclamation point. We kind of see who he's going to be, who he's turning back into. And you really can rely on that for next year, as long as there's not another injury.
Yeah, and even Cowboy was talking about the fact that you can tell that he's just looking more comfortable at the plate because he's taking more walks. There's a lot of times early on in the season, he just did not have that plate discipline that we saw in his first year with us back in 2023. And the reason that I brought this up is that the last 20 games for Matt McLain, he's looked a lot more like himself. He's still not all the way back, but we're talking about a 348 on base, and we're talking about a 491 slugging. That's pretty darn close to what we saw in 2023. And he has 8 walks during that time with 15 hits. So he's getting on base at least once a game, and in some cases, multiple times a game. And I don't necessarily know if he can earn back the point where he can hit number 2 in the lineup next year. I think Noelvi Marte has taken that from him for next season, but I certainly do believe that what we have seen for the last couple of weeks and what we will continue to see for the end of the season will prove to us that the Reds can put their trust in him as their everyday second baseman next year.
Yeah, or another position. You know, there is a defensive lineup on this team. You know, we keep asking the question. We're going to get into I'm going to leave it. I'm going to save it for the next segment, but I have an idea, and it involves moving Matt McLain's position as well. But you're absolutely right as far as what he brings offensively, what he brings defensively. It's all kind of coming together. You look at
his glove looked good last night.
His glove looks good. His bat looks good. It's just disappointing the way that it's played out. You know, the thing with Matt McLain is that he's that ball player this city loves to embrace, right? He goes out there, he's a blue collar, nose to the grindstone. He's not super flashy. He just goes out there and gets it done. And you know, the city was ready to just shower him with love this year coming back from the injury. And the fact that it was a slow start on top of everybody else's slow starts, I think really we felt it a little bit more because everybody wanted to love Matt McLain.
Well, and we all sort of did the thing that we do. I did it. We put too much on his shoulders. We said, well, he's back. All right, we're good. We're going to make the playoffs now.
And it was a broken shoulder at that.
Right. And we didn't give him that time. And it kind of makes me wonder a little bit, like, this isn't something that I feel strongly about, but what do you think about the whole, like, all right, the Reds were just going to trust him come hell or high water, no matter what his health was. Do you think that that's a point against that crawl? Or is that just, no, you got to do it because he's your guy?
You know, it's hard.
Take it on the chin a little bit. Yeah.
You know, I wouldn't have wanted to have seen Matt McLain spend the whole first half of the season in AAA. You know, He said he was healthy. I mean, as far as being able to go on the field and play, he was able to go out there and play. I mean, you know, it was just more about getting it back, and that was going to just have to happen over time. So no, I don't fault, because you don't know how long that was going to take. Was it going to take a week? Was it going to take 6 months? How do you plan for it? You had to allocate resources other directions. I'm okay with it. This is why I was so anti send him down when you, sir, wanted to send him down to the minor leagues. There was nobody better.
No,
there was nobody better. They weren't going to go sign a second baseman. That's not what wasn't going to happen. So
I mean, they could have played Gavin Lux, but Gavin Lux is a downgrade defensively and a downgrade with the bat whenever Matt McLain's right.
Right.
It wouldn't have solved it. I don't know. That was one of those things I was thinking about last night, because you watch him. He did have a little bit of a rough night, but Yu Darvish's curveball was on, because of course it was. Yu Darvish has been bad this season, but he was good against the Reds. That's just what happens. And Matt McLain was one of those guys that really struggled with it. But I was thinking a lot about him, watching him play, especially with the plays he was making. Man, those diving plays that he had. And there were a couple of like hard charging plays where he had to scoop and throw almost in the same motion, and he did it. I'm not saying it was Brandon Phillips-esque, but made me think a little bit about Brandon Phillips and how good he fielded that position. But I think that overall, I'm feeling very comfortable with him moving forward. And I think that he will just continue to roll into the guy that we expected him to be at the beginning of the season. And I think that 2026 is going to be much, much better than what we saw this year. The other part about Matt McLain that I kind of wanted to touch on here is something that I've seen a lot of people talk about, what the Reds need to add this season. And they all say the same thing. The Reds need to add a leader. I think Matt McLain is that leader, but because of his struggles and because of his year that he had, he was muted. And it was kind of like one of them things like, how can I be that leader? How can I be the clubhouse leader when I'm out there striking out 4 times in, every other game, or when I'm out there hitting $150 and all this other stuff, and I'm making errors left and right, and I'm just trying to get myself right. How do I get the rest of the team right when I'm not right myself? And so I think that as he gets more comfortable with his game, he is going to fill back into that leader role that we saw him begin to take in 2023.
Yeah, I think you're right. He probably, this is twofold. He probably dialed it back, and I think he didn't lose any of the respect of his teammates because of his struggles. Everybody recognized what was going on, but I think you're right. He dialed it back based on what was going on. He had to focus on himself and get himself right. And I completely agree with you. And by the way, the Padres game last night. Why is it? What is it about the San Diego Padres? What is it about these two teams playing each other that nothing can be straightforward? That it always goes like it went last. It does.
They've lost 13 of 15 in San Diego. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I think the 2 they won are the 2 that I was there for, if I remember correctly.
You got to go back to San Diego.
I got to go back to San Diego.
That's the answer. I'm twisting your arm right now. You need to go back to San Diego. I'm with you. Like, and the play, because I'm sure there's people talking about, well, you guys talk about his defense, and he made that bad play there at the end that cost the Reds the game. And it's like, honestly, if you look at that, even if he made the play, the runner's still on third base. Tatis still hits the ball to the outfield, and they still score that run. So that's not on him. I don't put the game on him in that spot. I just think that was one of those weird things where a pitcher's making a bad throw and he's not a first baseman trying to play first base on a bunt. I think overall he had a great game with the glove, and I think we'll continue to see the bat come around. I've been very happy with what Matt McLain has done here these last few weeks, and it's made me a lot more hopeful for what he can provide the Reds next year.
And just to be clear, we talked about this a little bit during the live show yesterday when we were in the comment section. Taking questions and comments. Matt McLain is a shoo-in for this team next year. There's no scenario where they're not relying on him. So, we're talking about him finishing strong and doing things here in this last month of the regular season, but that doesn't impact what they do with him next year. The Reds are going to pencil Matt McLain in somewhere in this lineup, somewhere on the field defensively.
100%. And they've got another guy on the roster that they just called up that I think is a shoo-in to at least make the roster. I don't know, like every day or whatnot, but man, he looks like he's got a lot of talent. Sal Stewart is here, but what is the plan? Like, where does this guy actually fit into the field? We'll discuss that next. Did you know that most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments? And when you don't have that full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there's Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or on your phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives. If you've put off organizing your finances, Monarch is for you. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization for your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. Don't let financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONMLB. If you can't watch us on YouTube, you can always listen to us on your favorite podcast app. We're on every single one of them. Check us out there today. And when you're done with today's episode, make sure you check out Locked On MLB. Sully's got you covered every single day with views around the league, and you have Locked On MLB Game Night. They watch every game every night so that you don't have to. All right, Steve, Sal Stewart is here, and he didn't start in Game 1 against San Diego. He did start in the final game against the Mets in lieu of Ke'Bryan Hayes, which I think we both were a little bit curious about. He's played third, he's played first, he can play second, but it kind of feels like all those positions are taken right now. And then you see Gavin Lux get the start at DH. Gavin Lux, by the way, for anybody that's like, wait a minute, Jeff, wait a minute, you want the rookie over Gavin Lux? Gavin Lux entering last night was 4 for 48 in his career in San Diego. Absolutely gets destroyed by the Padres. There's something about that stadium that just it's in his head. And then he went 0 for 4 last night as well. So I kind of wonder why Sal didn't DH there. I don't know, but there's so many different questions about this because it feels like he's here and everybody's just like, all right, where are you going to sit? We don't really have any seats for you, dude.
I think as long as they're still clinging to as your 0.5% chance of the playoffs, it's going to limit Sal Stewart a little bit. I do want the Reds to get a good look at him over the next few weeks because it really is going to impact what they do with him next year. Now look, this is a Sal Stewart segment. This is not about the player that I'm going to mention right now per se, but here's what I think. If Sal Stewart can play his way onto this roster between the end of this season and the off season and spring training, if he's going to be a piece of this puzzle, I think that he ends up at first base. I think he's going to be the first baseman for this team next year. If he makes the team, if he's going to be on the roster. Now everybody's like, what about Spencer Steer? What do you do? All right. Some things are going to have to happen. Spencer Steer is my new second baseman. I teased this a little while ago, Jeff. I'm moving Matt McLain. So now everybody's going, you're putting Matt McLain back in center field. No, I am not. I have finally come around on the way that I'm thinking. The Cincinnati Reds need to move Elly De La Cruz to the outfield. I'm done with his league-leading errors at shortstop. I want to see him in the outfield. I want to see him in center field. I want to see Noelvi Marte in a corner. I want to see TJ Friedel in a corner. And I want an infield of Ke'Bryan Hayes, Matt McLain, Spencer Steer, Sal Stewart. That is the best defensive lineup the Reds can put on the field.
That'd be interesting because I'm imagining Elly De La Cruz chase down that fly ball. The TJ.
Oh, he catches that ball. He catches that ball.
So that's intriguing. The other part of this, and I kind of mentioned this when we were talking about the idea and just kind of broaching it. Look, guys, we're going to talk about Elly to the outfield quite a bit this offseason and really discuss what it would look like and how it's going to affect the roster. But the question for me isn't necessarily can Elly play the outfield. It's how do they go about that transition? Because I am criticizing the Reds, and I think I'm going to put this one to the fire a little bit this offseason of having so much talent and just not having a plan for it, no matter who that is. It seems like they call them up to the major leagues, and they're like, great, let's see what we can have you do here. And they don't necessarily have a given position for guys. And feels like Elly has been the shortstop for a few years now, and they haven't. I mean, they played him at third base for a moment his rookie season, but that's the only other place he's played. Matt McLain, on the other hand, they messed around with putting him in the outfield in spring training, and they messed around with it in the Arizona Fall League. I wonder if they try that first. And I know that was something
They
that you
might.
had talked about last offseason. Like, could they put him in center field? He played there at UCLA.
He has the chops for it, and we know that. And the real wild card here, though, is Sal Stewart. Sal Stewart has to be good enough for you to reasonably rely on him to need to be in the starting lineup. You take that piece out of the equation, they're not moving Elly De La Cruz. They're not moving Matt McLain. They're not moving anybody. They'll go out and sign a prove-it guy to play an outfield position, which, you talked about yesterday. Sal Stewart's got to be the one. And to be the one, he's got to get some opportunity. So you're right. I would have rather seen him in the game as the DH yesterday rather than see Lux out there. I want to see him get his opportunities to prove that he can be counted on to be a piece of the puzzle. And then he's going to have to go play some type of fall league winter ball stuff. I want to see more out of Sal Stewart. And then he's going to have to come into Goodyear. And we talk about spring doesn't really matter much for most guys. It's going to matter for Sal Stewart. He's going to have to come into spring training next year and grab a hold of a position and grab a hold of a spot and not let it go.
There's a way too that he can really separate himself at first base from Spencer Steer, because I like the defense that Spencer Steer has played at first base, except for one thing: the ability to stretch when it comes to getting a throw. If Sal Stewart can improve on that, if Sal Stewart can do that with reasonable consistency, then we've got our first baseman next year. Because I think that Spencer Steer has done an admirable job fielding that position, but that's the one area that he's really deficient in. And I think there are a lot of errors, and we were talking about this last night during the game. There are a lot of errors on Elly De La Cruz that you could probably argue, if you had Joey Votto at first base, they aren't errors, they're outs. And Joey Votto is unfair comparing anybody at first base, but defensively he was not necessarily a Hall of Famer. He was fine.
And
but
I want to be clear
stretch.
before the comment section goes bonkers too. You're not trying to let Elly off the hook, because we've had this conversation. I mean,
you've got to
put it all out there. Jeff's not trying to let Elly off the hook. Elly's throws have been bad. Elly has done. He's been lackadaisical. There's been things, but to your point, a better defensive first baseman probably takes away 10 of Elly's errors that he's amassed this season.
Yeah, they gobble up those throws because they are meant, like, the first baseman prepared differently than other fielders, where it is about the stretch. It is about, okay, the ball's coming over here, I can stretch and get that ball, and trying to close the distance, where if Key Brian Hayes is making an amazing throw from the foul line, the first baseman has to stretch to make that throw take less time to get to his glove so that he can get the out quicker. There's parts of each play that aren't necessarily all on one guy. And as much as errors keep getting thrust upon Elly De La Cruz, if there were guys that stretched better at first base, then there would have been less errors. I'm not saying they would have been completely gone, because certainly he airmails some stuff and things like that. But that is the area where I think that Sal Stewart can really separate himself. And obviously at the plate, I think that Spencer Steer's year hasn't necessarily normalized to the point that we expected it to at the plate. Like, Sal Stewart has shown that he can hit the ball really hard. It's just he's got to kind of rein everything else in. He's hitting really high, hard pop-ups that aren't quite making it out of the yard because he's hitting it with such a high launch angle. And I think that those things are going to right the ship as he just gets more comfortable with Major League Baseball. But the area of opportunity is that stretch at first base.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And for Sal to do that also, it's got to be on the field. So yeah. I think what we keep coming back around to is, I don't know.
Steer if you have to.
I agree. And I don't think the 0.5% chance is enough of a chance to not find out about Sal Stewart. Let's play Sal Stewart. Don't keep him on the bench trying to say you're chasing this playoff spot, is what I'm saying. Get him in the game and see what's going to happen. See how he's going to, take that opportunity.
No, and I think that plays into other things as well, like give Connor Phillips more high leverage opportunities, give Zach Maxwell more high leverage opportunities. Let's get Graham Ashcraft back here and see, as long as he's healthy and ready to go, let's give him some more high leverage opportunities. We need to find out about some of these guys who the Reds can and can't trust. next year, because you're right. Like if Sal Stewart works and if they think that they've got something here, their offseason game plan is going to be much easier, because then they can shuffle some things. And as much as that won't be the answers that we're looking for, it will be better than them running the same team back out there next year.
Think about this. If you could go into the beginning of October, the season ends, and I mean, I know I feel like I'm throwing a big bucket of water on everybody's fire for the playoffs, but you know, it is
Only
what it is.
0.5%.
But if they could go into the end of the season ends, if they could go in knowing already, you know, we think Sal Stewart's going to play first base next year. That's what we think. You can have the tough conversations with a few of these guys right at the end of the season. You can go to Matt McLain and be like, we're moving you to center field. Or you can go to Elly and say, you know, the shortstop situation, you're just not getting better. These errors, we're not going to accept it any longer. We think our best utilization of your talent is to put you in the outfield. And you tell Elly that, and you tell him, because you know he's going to go play winter ball somewhere. It's just what he does. Tell him, go play center field. Go play the outfield, get comfortable. Come into Goodyear ready to go. You can have those conversations. If you don't play Sal Stewart, you don't have any answers before you get to Goodyear.
I have a thought about that, but I'll save that for another episode. But I do appreciate where this is going, because this could at least alleviate pressure on Nick Krall to be too wheeler dealer gambly this offseason, because we know he doesn't like to do that. Sal Stewart could make things a lot easier on him, give him, you know, pocket pairs or something like that as he sits down at the table that is the hot stove. And that is where we will end today's podcast. Thanks so much, everybody, for checking out today's Locked On Reds. If you're not subscribed, please become an everydayer and hit that subscribe button. We appreciate our everydayers out there who make Locked On Reds part of their everyday routine. Now, make sure you go check out Locked On MLB. Locked On MLB Game Night watches every game every night so that you don't have to. And Sully's got you covered with the best takes around the league and his trademark style humor, in which he will deliver everything in historical perspective. I'm pretty sure he was there for the first night game at Crosley Field. He can tell you all about it. And until next time, you know that Steve and I will be Locked On Reds every single day.